Have you ever lost a button on your favorite shirt? Well, don't just throw it away. But what else can you do with that missing button?
Today we're going to be showing you how to sew your own button.
To get started, we're going to need a few materials. You need needles. This is a pack available anywhere with different sizes. A good pair of sewing scissors. Your thread. Usually you would choose a matching thread, either matching the button or the shirt, but we're going to use a contrasting. That way you guys can see it easier on the film. Now, we normally sew it right onto our shirt, but so it's easier for you guys to see, we're going to use a scrap piece of fabric.
Let's talk about those buttons a little bit more. Now, there are two basic kinds of buttons. You have your shank buttons, which are buttons that have this little piece on them here. This little nub is called a shank. You see the needle goes through there. And flat buttons. And flat buttons do not have a shank. Most flat buttons will have either 4 holes or 2 holes, like this one. Okay, 2 holes. Buttons can be functional or decorative. Shank buttons are typically used for heavier duty items such as coats, jackets, anything that's going to be a thicker material. And your flat buttons are typically used for shirts, dress shirts, and such. As you can see, the shanks can be pretty different. This one here is a pretty flat shank, but it still is a shank. It has this little dome over the top as well, which is pretty typical of shank buttons. And they can come in all shapes, sizes, colors, depending on variations. I've also seen some buttons that have more than 4 holes, which get a very decorative button stitch, but they're used again mostly for decorative purposes.
Start with the spool at your nose, grab the end of the thread and extend your arm fully. This gives us about a yard of thread, which is a good starting point for sewing on your button. You snip the thread and then fold it in half. This part takes practice. With our thread folded in half, we're taking the open ends and we're going to slide it through the eye of the needle. The eye is the part that has the hole in it. Once we have the thread through, we're going to pull it about 4 or 5 inches from the needle. So you have a little tail. See? Tail and our loop. Now let's take a closer look at threading that needle. Just pop the thread through our 2 loose ends and pull. Again, this takes practice.
Okay, so we're going to start with hole 1. You come up through the back of the fabric into hole 1, across over to hole 2, back under the fabric, and up to hole 3, and then across, down into 4. So with our button, we see hole 1, so we're popping up and then down into hole 2, and then up into hole 3 and down into hole 4.
Okay, so you're going to start with your needle in your dominant hand between your finger and your thumb. I like to just pop my needle right through the fabric. This is where we're going to put our button. So we're going to slide our button onto the needle into hole 1. Now hold your button down and pull your thread, but we want to keep the loop on the back. So see, we have about 1 inch on the back. Okay, now we're going to go down into hole 2, which we're going to do across. Make sure you hold your button tight. Okay, and pull. Now slide your needle through that loop and give it a good tug. This is going to secure our button. Now we have that. We're going to go into hole 3 through the back of the fabric, up into hole 3, and sometimes you have to poke your needle around to feel for that hole. There we go. And pull. This time you can pull real tight, and then down into hole 4. And again, pull your thread all the way. Now we're going to repeat this, going back into hole 1, up, and down hole 2, back up to hole 3. You may have to hold your button a little bit, and back through hole 4. And again, give it a good tug. Back up into hole 1. And down into hole 2. Back up through hole 3. And down through hole 4. Now that our button is secure, you may have to adjust your thread a little bit, but our button is secure back there. We're going to come up through the fabric, and we want to go parallel to the button. So not through the hole, just parallel right there. And pull. Again, give it a good tug. We're going to wrap that thread around the button. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. And then we're going to take our needle and poke it through those stitches that we just made and through those holes, but we need to run the needle parallel to the button and the fabric. So don't go through the fabric, just parallel here. Okay, pop our needle through. There we go. And give it a good tug. Wrap it around 180 degrees. You may need to adjust your thread a little bit. Make sure that it's even. There we go. Okay. Now, again, wrap our needle and poke the needle through. What we're doing here is we're creating a shank, like we talked about before. It just makes the button a little bit more stable. Wrap and poke through again And as you build, it's going to get a little harder to poke through, but we need to go at least 3 times here to give it a nice, good, secure shank. All right, so now this time we're going to leave a little bit of a loop like we did at the beginning and take our needle through that. That gives us a nice, neat knot that nobody will be able to see. So you're going to clip your thread as close to the button as you possibly can to give us a nice, neat look.
We talked about the basic tools to start with, but in closing here, I wanted to talk about my little toolbox. This I bought at a fabric store. You can get many variations of these at any fabrics and craft store, but the reason I wanted to talk about this one is because it is still small enough to put in a handbag or in the glove box of your car. But it does have some very useful features. So it comes with a pack of needles, which you will always need. There's also a needle threader. It also had this cute little tomato pin cushion. Scissors, which are very important. A thimble. Various threads here. So almost every color you could possibly need. And a little pack of pins. So this is perfect for any sort of quick stitch you need to do. So if your hem drops or you have to sew your button on real quickly, the only thing I would suggest adding to this would be a couple of small buttons. And these you can also buy in the fabric store in packs. I would suggest putting a bunch of little clear buttons in here because most dress shirts will have clear buttons. But if you have any buttons from your favorite dress shirts, usually come with that little plastic bag with buttons. You can go ahead and toss that in there so you have your favorite shirt buttons. And then this you can take on the go. So if you are heading to a meeting or heading out on the town and pop a button, you have your little emergency kit. Now you have all the tools that you need, so don't throw that shirt away. You can sew your own button.